just said, but one is don't skip some practices. That's similar to the first one, but in particular what it's saying is, that one is saying that the first point is this, it's not just a general thing of don't skip some practices, it's particularly about morality. In other words, it's saying, if you're really training in cherishing others and in being loving, then you're going to be even more precise in your ethical behavior, because the foundation of all ethics is not harming. Right? Whereas what is ethics, actually? From a Buddhist point of view, all ethics, like if you analyze all the different rules that the Buddha made, right? Don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't exaggerate, don't, you know, all these different things, right? They're all about not harming others, not deceiving others, not tricking others, not trying to take advantage of others. And so the first point is that, so it's a little different than the other one of giving up the mind training. It's ethics, really. It's saying, don't skip over the small points of ethics, right? Because the small points of ethics are also about not harming people. The second of those three general points is it's a little different. Actually, the reckless one is more behavioral. This one's a little more internal. It's don't think even. It's be guard against thinking, I'm so great for being compassionate. I'm so great for being loving. Whereas recognizing that's a way that the ego co-opts it. So the reckless one was actually a little more behavioral. It was thinking that and then acting out in a sort of reckless way. This one's not about acting out, it's just about watching your mind and guarding against pride or arrogance around that. And the third general point here, and this is an important one actually, if you analyze it, if you check your own experience, they're all important, but this one you'll, again, if you try practicing this, sometimes you'll do this, is don't be partial in your practice towards some people or being sentient beings and not towards others. And I'll give an example of what I mean by that. You know, if somebody who you think is very important is having a hard time, right? How likely are you to reach out to them? And then if somebody you don't like is having a hard time, how likely are you to reach out to them? And in terms of also partiality, right? It's like in our earlier contemplation, right? Birds, even ants, right? Ants go towards sugar and go away from somebody who's pounding next to them, right? Ants want to be happy and not want to suffer also. So what this is saying in terms of don't be partial is like that, right? Is my compassion equal towards a bee as it is towards my best friend? Probably not. Right? But that's something to analyze, right? Again, and it's not saying that, you can disagree with the Buddha. You can say, oh, bees don't want happiness. They want to suffer. Right? And so it doesn't matter. My friend wants to be happy, but bees don't care about that. They don't mind if somebody crushes them. Right? But then you have to analyze and see, is that my prejudice or is that some genuine recognition of the experience of the other, right? Is that based on empathic understanding, or is that based on prejudice? So this is saying, partly that, right? Beware of your subtle prejudices, right? Because, do we value a person more than an ant? No, and maybe there's a reason for that, maybe not, but it's saying question that, right? It's saying analyze it and see, does the ant not care about its own happiness? What's that based on? Is it based on some prejudice because I'm human? And so I prefer people like me. And then if you do it like that, I'm human, so I prefer humans, I don't care about ants, well then, what's the difference between that and saying, well, I'm this religion, I don't care about somebody not? How different are those, right? If I say I only like people of my race or gender or religion, or if I say I only like beings of my species. So it's just saying question those things, right? Because there's a bias there, and that gets in the way of training your mind in universal love and compassion. Next one, transform your attitude, but maintain your natural behavior. That one's fairly straightforward, right? And actually, though, it's a little bit of a subtle point because you understand that the attitude is saying, again, it's about training your mind, right? But what this is saying really is this, I just want to differentiate a little bit, just something to clarify, is what it's really saying in the commentary on it is, maintain whatever behavior you were doing before until you reach a point where the extent of your love and compassion make it unbearable not to do something to help others, then do that, right? But only change your behavioral patterns when it's grounded in an unbearable sense of I have to do this to help somebody. It's like don't change your behavior just because you think that will look, even to yourself, much less to others, more compassionate. Does that make sense? Keep your behavioral patterns normal, however they were, until. So I guess I'll give an example. Like sometimes I see sometimes when I would be with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, right? He does all kinds of very unusual behaviors. Like he'll like for example, if a dog is dying on the side of the road, he'll insist on pulling over, and he'll go and he'll pray for that dog for like a half hour, and they'll be late somewhere, things like that. He does that all the time, and I remember so there is, and sometimes you'll see where on his face it's just unbearable. It's like as if his mother were dying. Of course, like if your mother were dying on the side of the road, of course you would swerve, right? You wouldn't drive by. That's his feeling, right? It's like his mom is there. You don't just drive by your mom when she's dying. You be there to hold her while she dies and pray, right? But if you don't feel that way, then don't hold up traffic, right? That's what this is saying. Whereas if your Lama Zopa, if you have that quality that he has of feeling like it's like your mother, then swerve and stop over and go pray and like that. But if that's not really what's in your heart, don't hold up traffic because you're getting in people's way. And what are you doing? You see what I mean? So it's saying you have to analyze it based on your own mind. Does that make sense? And so you can't judge somebody else on that. You have to judge it for yourself. Does that make sense? Don't speak of someone else's, of others' incomplete qualities. And I'm going to lump that one together with the next one. Don't concern yourself with others' business. So again, what's that saying? You could look at that and say, well, wait a second. If you're cultivating compassion, how do you not concern yourself with others' business? Their business is your business, and everybody's business is together, and so on, right? Which is true on one level. But what that's saying, in part, is this: is be careful of that, because what this is suggesting is a particular mind training here, which is this: if somebody asks you for help, or if you're engaged in helping them, and and they say, I'm having a really hard time with this, right? And then you talk about some problem they're having, that's not what this is talking about, right? That's compassion. What this is saying is what we all do at times, right? Which is kind of like, first of all, it's like a little bit like being a busybody, but it's also like, how much time do we spend saying, did you see what so-and-so was like? They did this and that, that's so annoying, they're like this. So one is like obsessing or talking socially about other people's faults, and the other is thinking too much about other people's faults. And what the mind training here is this, is unless there's a very specific reason for you to help somebody by focusing on their faults, the mind training is to think, whatever faults I'm seeing in others, it's probably my own fault that I'm noticing because I share it with them. And I had a Tibetan friend who once pointed that out. He said, when you point your finger at somebody, there's 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. It was a common Tibetan phrase, apparently. And that's the point that this is actually getting at. It's saying, unless you're specifically helping that person, when we all do this at times, like, oh, that person, they're so impatient. Oh, that person, they're so, what's the word? Anxious and agitated. Oh, that person, they're so prideful. Right? The point is when you point your finger like that, even if it's in your own mind, much less if it's verbal, there's 3 fingers pointing back towards you. In other words, why am I noticing that? Right? You stop and you think, am I noticing that to help that person? Or am I noticing that because it's bothering me? And if it's bothering me, most likely it's because I share that quality with them. My job is to work on, and then that brings you right back to number 7, right? So just to counter my own disturbing emotion around that, right? You see my point there? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That one's a really important one, I think, because we do it so often, right? So much of our conversation can be that. And if you're talking about that, that's a sign you're not practicing love or compassion. I guess I'll just keep going because I want to cover these. So I'll keep going for a while. Give up every hope of reward. And that one applies in all different ways. But what it's saying is this, right? Oh, I'm being so loving, I'm being so compassionate, I'm doing things for others. And then doesn't that creep in, right? If you think of this, as I said earlier, as Buddhist masters over the centuries, practicing and then reflecting on what goes wrong and how their ego co-opts, isn't that a common one, right? I do this and I do this and I do this, and then it's like, when will they pay me back? When will I get some big recognition for them? When will, right? So a lot of that is interpersonal, but then there's also, Buddhists are actually worse on this, because that's one, right, is when will they, but actually I think Buddhists can be even worse on this point. Because Buddhists can then say, well, no, okay, I'm going to be so sentient, I'm not going to care if they pay me back, but man, I'm going to have a really good future rebirth. And man, I'm going to achieve liberation, and I'm going to be some like person grooving out in a pure land, and you know, that's what I get for all this. Right? That's just the ego co-opting again, right? I'll be in a pure land, you know. It's going to be some kind of thing for me. So it's like whether you're doing it in this life by thinking, oh, they'll, you know, they should thank me and do something for me, or whether it's you're thinking, I'm going to be a king in my next life because I've done so all this, or I'm going to go to Amitabha's Pure Land for doing all that, and then I'll, you know, then I'll be like this incredibly blissful being. That's just your projection of wanting something for yourself, right? And that's not love or compassion. That's another version of co-opting for your ego.